Hi, my name is Ryan Bermudez, and I will be hosting this next installment on our dive into the Rohingya Refugee Crisis, also known as the Rohingya Genocide. In this second episode, we will be focusing on how the Rohingya Refugee Crisis began. To recap, the Rohingya are a Muslim ethnic minority that live in the Rakhine province of Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. This crisis that the Rohingya find themselves in has been the culmination of decades worth of violence and hatred, and we will unpack that long and tumultuous past in this segment. The crisis the Rohingya find themselves in can trace its roots back to the Second World War, when the Japanese began encroaching on Myanmar, which was a British colony at that time. The Muslim Rohingya supported the British, while the Rakhine Buddhists supported the Japanese, sowing the seeds of conflict to come. Following World War II, Burma, as it was known at the time, gained its independence from Great Britain and held its first ever democratic elections soon after. The newly drafted Burmese constitution explicitly stated that all in Burma are equal under the law, irrespective of birth, religion, sex, or race. Additionally, many of the initial governing body of Burma were Rohingya, but we will soon see that this utopic version of what Burma could have been does not last long. In 1962, General Ne Win and the military instigated a coup, placing the military in firm control of the country. This coup marks the beginning of the more direct and state-run discrimination against the Rohingya. In the 1970s, the new military-run government implemented laws that decreased the Rohingya civil rights. One such law was the Emergency Immigration Act of 1974, which considered the Rohingya foreigners to Burma. During this period, the Rohingya were stripped of their national ID cards, and in 1978, the operation known as Dragon King was undertaken by government forces, further verifying the Rohingya as foreigners and non-citizens and allowing government soldiers to perpetrate violence on them. From the 1980s to the 1990s, the military oversaw a crackdown on pro-democracy protests, giving them an excuse to materialize violence onto the Rohingya. Elections were held in the 1990s, giving the new Democratic Party control of the government, but the military refused to cede power and thus rejected the new democratic elections. This action allowed for the operation known as Operation Pui Thaya, also known as Clean and Beautiful Nation, to be undertaken in 1991, in which soldiers were permitted to commit violence upon the Rohingya. This culminated in the forced exodus of 250,000 Rohingya to flee the country into countries such as Bangladesh. For those that stayed, the environment quickly deteriorated as the military-run government created a new secret police force known as the Nakasa, with the sole purpose to terrorize the remaining Rohingya in the Rakhine province of the country. The Rohingya also faced denial of birth certificates for newly born Rohingya, in an effort by the government to deny citizenship to newly birthed Rohingya, thus avoiding their existence. During the 2000s, the violence reached new heights as the Buddhist national groups known as the 969 and the Mabatha actively persecuted and terrorized Rohingya villages, prompting more and more to flee to Bangladesh. By 2015, the government began classifying the naturally born Rohingya as immigrants from Bangladesh, and also passed race and religion laws that banned the intermarrying with Rohingya and denied them the right to vote. The Rohingya retaliated in force to this, where 9 police officers were killed during a series of attacks on police posts. Unfortunately, this gave the government the perfect excuse and opportunity to ramp up their anti-Rohingya agenda. Government soldiers were sent on campaigns of terror, resulting in whole villages destroyed, killing 9,000 Rohingya and forcing more than 750,000 Rohingya to flee the country. The turbulent environment in Myanmar for the Rohingya has not ceased, as discrimination and violence is always a present danger to the Rohingya that do remain in the country. Since then, the U.S. has deployed economic sanctions on Myanmar in response to the killings, and a case has been brought to the International Court of Justice in 2020, calling for the treatment of the Rohingya genocide. But we will ever see if life improves for the Rohingya in Myanmar and whether or not those who had fled can return to their ancestral home.